Welcome to our podcast, Cry, Laugh, Eat, Making Friends with Your Emotions. It's great to have you with us. My name is Helen.
Welcome back. It's Ruth here. And each week on our podcast, we're going to look at everyday situations and the effect the emotions have and how emotions can become your friend in those situations.
We are excited to be back in 2024 after having had a break. It's great to be here with you again. If you've been a regular listener, we've been sharing in our first 13 episodes all about emotions and the 6 emotions that we talk about. And we've shared the importance of them and how they can become your friends. We've set a foundation for the way that we think and feel about emotions. This year in our podcast, we're going to grow with that moving forward, and we're going to share some real life experiences from ourselves and hopefully from others as we go along.
We're actually going to have guests this year at least once a month, and they will share their experiences too. And hopefully there'll be experiences that you can relate to and learn from as we do.
And the whole idea is to build upon the heart of our work, which is making friends with your emotions. So as we explore each other's stories, we can explore together how emotions can become your friends.
As Helen mentioned earlier, we have just returned from a break.
Yeah.
And it's the new year. And what does everyone do at the beginning of the year, Helen?
They try to set new goals and
Yes.
plans. And
How are yours going?
wow, my plan to eat really healthy has not gone exceptionally well.
Yeah, I lasted half a day.
Yes, same. It lasted till someone gave me some chocolates.
And my idea of going to the gym January the 1st, January the 2nd, January the 3rd, I started today.
Yeah, we started together.
The 15th, whoopee. We'll all get there. But you know out there what it's like when you set goals. And keep going, that's all we can say. Just keep trying your best. Anyway, just thinking about your break, Helen, was there anything that you remember that stood out to you, an experience that you want to share at the beginning of a new year?
Yeah, I do have one actually. It was a wonderful time. I had my oldest son and his wife and our 3 little grandchildren staying with us for 3 weeks, and it was full of laughter and cuddles and noise, and it was wonderful. Loved every minute of it. And on the last night, they were about to fly home at 3 a.m. the next morning, and I was putting Macy and Parker, the 2 oldest.
How old is Macy?
Macy
Parker?
is 5 and Parker had just turned 4 while he was with us.
Oh,
Then there's little Archie who's 18 months. Well, he was already asleep and in Mummy and Daddy's room. And I was putting Macy and Parker to bed, and we were cuddling in the bed together. And I said to them, I'm going to really miss you. And we all felt a little sad for a moment. They cuddled me really tight. And then I noticed that little Macy had tears in her eyes, and that made me get tears in my eyes. And little Parker looked and he said, Bima, you're crying. I said, yeah, I am. And he cuddled in tight, and he actually fell asleep really quickly. And so it was just Macy and I. And I could see pain in Macy's eyes at the thought of saying goodbye. And I could see how she was really choked up as we were talking together about things. And then she started to sob, like a really heartfelt, deep, heartbreaking sob.
a primal sound.
Yeah, she really sobbed, which made me cry, and I was holding her tight thinking, I can't really make her feel better. I don't know how. I know enough to know words don't always make you feel better. So I was just thinking, what can I do? I just held her and I was stroking her hair, and then I felt she just needs to cry. And so I said to her, it's okay to cry, Macy. Just let it out. Just let it keep coming. Just cry. And she did. She really let it out. And I held her tight. And
I love that, Helen, because that's what parents and grandparents need to teach their children and grandchildren, that when you experience an emotion, particularly sadness, there's great strength actually in releasing that and crying. and allowing yourself to feel it, because that's certainly not how our generation grew up. We got a hiding if we cried. It just made it
such a
worse.
sook. Yeah, that's it. I didn't want to say anything and interfere with that crying as much as it hurt, because I was actually the one holding mine in. My throat was throbbing with that pain you feel at one, at saying goodbye, and two,
Separation.
At her, yeah, and at her sadness. And so we cuddled and we cried together, and then she got that sob where after you finished crying, you and it was lovely, and we were holding each other. And then after the crying subsided, she needed a tissue, so she climbed off the bed and reached beside the bed and got a tissue, and she came back to blow her nose, and she ended up laughing because as she blew her nose, it kind of went made a funny noise. And we ended up in fits of laughter together. It was one of those beautiful moments that you never forget. And she ended up saying, I feel so happy, Mima. And we talked about sadness, and I was able to say, do you know why we were so sad? It's just because we love each other. And
that's the thing about separation and loss of someone that you love. That's the price you pay for love when you lose someone, is that grief visits and it never leaves, because that's part of loving, isn't it?
yeah. And I'm talking about a simple goodbye, and I'll see Macy again. And I know you're coming from a space of having lost your husband
and maybe
he passed away.
There are people out there that are feeling all kinds of loss.
That's right. Loss has many levels and many layers, doesn't it?
If it is a deeper loss, like losing your husband or a child or someone that you dearly, dearly love, then grief never goes away, because that would mean love would have to go away. And grief just changes shape and form, and you adjust.
Yeah, so I mean, our story has a lovely happy ending because we chat on video, and
I think the wonderful thing to me about your experience with Macy is that Macy now understands that emotions are her friend, that she doesn't have to be ashamed like we were raised, to see crying or feeling upset as a weakness of character. You were able to teach Macy to release that. And the great thing is that she was laughing at the end of it.
It's beautiful. And then to add to that, in previous episodes, we've talked about emotions being like a wave of the ocean. They ebb and flow. Well, when we had to get up at 3 a.m., one funny thing is Macy got up and went to the bathroom to brush her teeth and saw herself in the mirror and said, my face looks funny, because it was still it's swollen from tired and puffy eyes from crying. But
so boy, do you all relate out there?
Macy, that's how I look every morning. But when we went to the car, when the whole family was going, and it was the goodbye, then little Parker was crying and Macy was crying. Poor little Archie was looking like, what's going on? But that emotion came back again.
It's like waves, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course I knew it would subside as they drove off to the airport. And it was lovely because my son sent a photo later of the children and they're laughing in the photo. And my point of sharing that is about the emotions are like that wave. They do ebb and flow. They do come back, then they go away.
Lovely. Thank you. Dr. Helen. Oh boy, there must be something in the water. So Helen, why did you want to share this experience with our listeners? What is it that you wanted to share with the listeners so that it would be helpful to them like it was to you?
I love what I learned from that experience, and there were two things. The first was that you don't have to fix everything. I think many of us, we love to help.
And we always feel that we need to help fix other people's problems.
Yes. So I realised we don't have to fix everything. In that little moment while Macy was crying, it really hurt watching her cry and feel that sad. But I realised I didn't have to fix it. I couldn't fix it.
And the beauty of not jumping in, boots and all, to help fix other people's problems. And you allowed Macy to develop a responsibility for her own emotions, for how she was feeling. So that's amazing, because we do often feel responsible for everything. You allowed Macy to learn, just at a very simple level, but a significant level, how to be responsible with her emotions.
Great point. I think too, whenever I have fallen into a space of wanting to fix things for someone, it actually then becomes about me and how I feel. And for a little moment there with Macy, it did, because it was really hurting. But
I love that. That's great.
and so when I took it off me and thought about Macy, and knowing like the waves, it would subside, and it would be big for a while, and it would really hurt like a big pounding wave. But when I stopped thinking about what I could do and thought about Macy, I was actually then really present. And it was beautiful, because then I could be there with her and just hold her.
So was that the second huge message?
It really was about being present. You often hear, just be present. Well, that's not always really easy. It's not for me, because often I'll be fearful of not being enough. But in that moment, I realized, well, there is nothing I can say that makes it better. What I can do is hold her and let her cry and be there as she comes through it. And that allowed me to be present without over worrying. What can I do to make her feel better? What can I say? Because anything I could have said might have been so inappropriate, like, don't cry, it'll be all right. Well, it didn't feel all right. It wasn't all right for a little while for her.
And it gets so stressful when you're trying to fix things for people.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
So how did you feel, even though you couldn't say anything to change the situation, when you were present and you didn't feel the need to jump in and fix everything, how did you feel personally?
While there was a little bit of pain for Macy and myself, it was actually a really beautiful experience. It was really just being really still and being there. So what it felt was almost peaceful.
I was just going to say, it feels to me like it was actually peaceful in spite of the emotion of sadness. There was a peace.
The underlying deeper feeling was peace, and to stay present in it made it a very special experience for both of us. I may not have said it in the story, but when she got up at 3 a.m. and got ready to get in the car to go to the plane, when she was in the bathroom brushing her teeth, she said, Mima, I've never cried like that before. And she was reflecting, and she was happy, and we were laughing about our puffy eyes. And it's really beautiful, because we could just be present. I think the other thing I felt was, because I stilled my own thinking about I have to make it better, I told myself I don't. And being present, it actually let Macy be present in her emotions.
Oh,
yeah.
That's lovely.
It is lovely, isn't it?
Isn't it? Thanks, Helen. I really love that message. We're a little sad to leave you now, but we thank you so much for joining us this week, and you will find links to our podcast and to our book, Making Friends with Your Emotions, on the show notes of our podcast. Our finishing phrase for 2024 is 4 words, which have already had a good impact on Helen and I. And the words come from an American prophet called Nephi. He was in a situation where he had to do something, and he had no idea where to go, what to do. But he said, nevertheless, I went forth. And that word nevertheless, if you look online, there's different synonyms for it. It can mean in spite of, or however, or regardless of. I went forth. And Helen and I have been inspired to use that too in our conversations. Sometimes we're afraid of something or we're not quite sure, should we really? And then we look at each other and say, nevertheless, I went forth. So in spite of whatever's happening in your life, in your world, don't let it paralyse you. I went forth is a verb. It's a phrase that says you carried on. And that carrying on could be just getting up out of bed. The carrying on could be putting aside the fear and doing something that you've always wanted to do but have been afraid of.
It could be having that cry you need.
Exactly. There's so many things I went forth can mean. So we're going to finish this podcast and we're going to say it every podcast this year. Nevertheless, I went forth. See you next week.
Bye. We are excited to be back, and if you've been a regular listener of ours, you will have been listening.
Take two.
Welcome back. Do-do-do. Welcome back. Welcome back. If you remember back to our last episode, we talked about 3 questions. This podcast is called Cry, Laugh, Eat. That little crunch was the eating part. We have some munchies.
Okay, so how do we end? Not like that.